Good evening. I'm Brian Trumbull with your nightly review for Monday, December 17th. That was Richard Strauss, Der Rosenkavalier suite from the opera of the same name. My father and I think it's perhaps the most beautiful piece of music ever composed. I haven't addressed you formally since Friday's tragic events in Newtown, Connecticut. For now, I just want to express my deep condolences to the families of the victims and the first responders whose lives were also changed forever. They need our support for a long, long time to come. On the other issues emanating from Sandy Hook, I'm holding off for now, but boy do I have some thoughts. Well, the stock market rallied strong today on optimism about the fiscal cliff. The Dow Jones finished up 100 points to 13,235, up 0.8%. The S&P was up 1.2%, and NASDAQ was up 1.2% as well, up 39 points to 3,010. Tokyo's Nikkei was up 0.9%. London's FTSE and Frankfurt's DAX were basically unchanged. China rose 0.5%. Gold is at $16.99, oil 87.40, and the 10-year Treasury is at 1.77%. Beginning to climb a bit. I'll get into that more on Tuesday. Excuse me, Tuesday. As for Europe, I'm taking the day off when it comes to Europe, which is a good sign for Europe. Not that their problems are over. Far, far from it. On the fiscal cliff, President Obama and House Speaker Boehner met again today, which was a little surprise for the markets, and that's what helped spur the optimism. However, unwarranted, I believe, in the long run. Boehner did supposedly propose to allow the president to raise the tax rates on those earning over $1 million, which would bring in about $440 to $460 billion in revenue over 10 years. If the president would agree to reductions on spending. And then on the debt ceiling, Boehner would give up making this an issue for a year as long as the president agreed to dollar-for-dollar reductions in spending. So raise the debt ceiling $1 trillion, but $1 trillion in spending reductions. Of course, Obama has wanted to raise the tax rates on those earning $250,000. So you have Boehner at $1 million now, Obama at $250,000. So maybe the Democrats may be willing to compromise at $500,000 if the House Republicans would agree to that. And Obama may be considering a change in how the cost of living increases on the so-called chained CPI, or chained consumer price index, which would reduce future benefit increases. Much more will be fleshed out tomorrow. Just want to check one thing on Apple stock. Forgot to check that. Apple had been below 500 earlier in the day, and it closed at 519, up $9. Okay, we'll be fleshing out much more tomorrow on the details of the fiscal cliff, and just to reiterate, you have the debt ceiling, Currently at 16.4 trillion is the limit. That's going to be hit soon. Then the Treasury starts a series of extraordinary measures to meet obligations for another 6 to 10 weeks. So it'll be interesting to see if the President and Obama reach some kind of agreement on the debt ceiling before we get into January and February. In Syria, it's been 21 months, 40,000 plus dead. Many are surmising that Bashar Assad may flee to his Alawite homeland on the shores of the Mediterranean to make a last stand. The Alawites, of course, are an offshoot of Shia Islam. Supposedly 7 Alawite commando battalions and at least 1 ballistic missile battalion have already been redeployed there, and that happened earlier this month, according to the Sunday Times of London. Sources said one of the commando battalions and the missile one had chemical weapons. Sunni villages on the Alawite stronghold have been cleansed, supposedly. Meanwhile, an Islamist rebel group overran a military base in Aleppo. While there are increasing signs Assad is on the verge of many of his chemical weapons sites, verge of moving, pardon me. On Egypt, voting on a draft constitution took place on Saturday. This is for half the population, including Cairo and Alexandria, Alexandria being the second largest city. The other half is next week. Of course, the draft constitution is a choice between the Muslim Brotherhood and the radical Salafist bloc who desire a religious state, and those who want Egypt to retain a secular face with Islamic characteristics. The early unofficial tally showed backers of the Constitution with 57%, but Cairo and Alexandria hold the most in opposition compared to the rest of the country voting next Saturday. That said, Cairo did vote 57-43 against the Constitution, so it gives you a sense of the opposition's strength in Cairo. And again, if the backers of the Constitution are already at 57%, they will easily exceed that when all is said and done. But there were widespread allegations of fraud, minimal oversight after large segments of the judiciary walked out, and turnout, this is important, was just 32%, according to the Brotherhood. So just how legitimate can it be? Most countries require a minimum turnout threshold on constitutional referendums. And now the opposition is calling for mass protests on Tuesday in Cairo and elsewhere to bring down the invalid constitution, in the words of the National Salvation Front. Mohammed al-Baradei, coordinator of the group, of the NSF, as we'll call it, renewed his call for President Morsi to shelve the referendum and hold talks with the opposition. In Japan, they're about to have their 7th prime minister in 6.5 years. The Tokyo Nikkei index, by the way, is up about 15% since Prime Minister Noda called a snap election. But since Prime Minister in waiting, Shinzo Abe, left office the first time in 2007, the Nikkei had fallen 40%. So what of today, following Abe's landslide election over the weekend? The state broadcaster has the opposition, Abe's party, Liberal Democratic Party, and its smaller ally picking up 300 to 345 of 480 seats in the lower house Diet Parliament. They only had 139 before the vote, so call it 320. They need 320 of 480 to give them a 2/3 supermajority, which would allow them to ram legislation through the upper house, which votes in about 7 months, if I recall. But the upper house vote in 7 months won't really matter if Abe can get his 2/3 supermajority. At least he'll have 7 months to prove himself without too much pressure in Parliament. Abe also still has to deal with entrenched deflation, needs to weaken the yen to help exports. Of course, every country in the world would love to weaken their currencies to help exports. Public debt needs to be sliced, though the IMF expects Japan's debt to keep increasing the next 5 years. So anyway, Abe proposes a surge in public works spending, and demands the Bank of Japan ease monetary policy aggressively to reflate the nation, or to reflate the economy, The LDP has also been cautious about weaning the country off nuclear power. In a poll of voters by the state-run broadcaster, only 10% of respondents ranked energy policy as the most important issue in the election. Of course, Japan closed all of its nuclear plants after the tsunami. So only 10% ranked energy as the most important issue, compared with half who named the economy and jobs as the primary issue. And on the defense front, Shinzo Abe has certainly taken on a more militaristic approach. He said after the election, China is challenging the fact that the disputed islands in the East China Sea, which Japan calls the Senkakus and the Chinese call the Diaoyus, he said China is challenging the fact that the islands are Japan's inherent territory. Our objective is to stop the challenge. We don't intend to worsen relations with China. Because Japan and China, this is Abe, Japan and China need to share the recognition that having good relations is in the national interest of both countries. China lacks this recognition a little bit. I want them to think anew about mutually beneficial strategic relations. Now, Abe has been a real hawk. He did say his first foreign visit would be to the United States. But he's making it clear Japan owns the Senkakus. So China, through the Xinhua news agency, said history has proven many times that a peaceful Japan is a boon to the region and the whole world, while a restless Japan will bring new disturbances to the world. China is worried about what it calls Japan's rapid shift to the right. Earlier, China on Friday provided the United Nations with detailed claims of its own to waters in the East China Sea, apparently laying out its legal argument in the ongoing territorial dispute. The Foreign Ministry said it submitted documents claiming waters extending beyond its 370-kilometer exclusive economic zone. Actually, it claims lands that are only about 200 kilometers from Okinawa. However, this move will have little real impact. The UN commission to which it submitted its claim comprises geological experts, but has no authority to resolve the claim. Back in the States, this just came about this afternoon. Congressman Tim Scott is going to replace Senator Jim DeMint in South Carolina. South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley thus is making Tim Scott the first black senator from the South to hold the office since the late 1800s. Right now, Scott is the only black Republican in Congress and has been supported by the conservative Tea Party movement. He's been in Congress since 2010, and he would become the only African American member of the Senate and the first since President Barack Obama left in 2008. So we congratulate soon-to-be Senator Tim Scott. That'll take effect in January. That's all for tonight. I'll be back with you on Tuesday. Keep the men and women of our armed forces in your thoughts and prayers, and for more stuff, go to stocksandnews.com. Take care.